So Pharaoh has sent them because the firstborn Pharaoh was nervous about losing his own life. He already lost his child, so he sent them out. He sent them out, and they left. And the B'yad Rama, right? As it says, they left B'yad Rama with an outstretched hand. They left. They didn't. Pharaoh kicked them out in the middle of the night, but they wouldn't even leave right then. They said, no. Well, when it gets a little bit lighter, we'll leave. It's better for us if it's lighter, and we're not vagabonds that just disappear in the night. It was 3 days after, and then this week's Torah portion begins, and the Torah portion says, "Vayihi Beshalach pares am," and it happened to happen when Pharaoh sent the people, and God sent them through a circuitous route. God did it for two reasons. So they didn't come out of Egypt and head straight. They made a right, and then they made another right, and they made a left, etc. So, and the Torah gives the reason is that God didn't want them to know how to return to Egypt quickly. So he gave them a way. And by the way, God was proven correct. Many times they said, let us just return to Egypt. So here it wasn't so easy. The other reason is that Torah mentions, but not as clearly, is that the fact that they took an odd route made Pharaoh think, they don't know where they're going, right? So they don't know. They, instead of going, to the desert, they ended up in this place and that place. And he said, they don't know where they're going, and therefore it's my opportunity. Probably Lenny. It's the opportunity to chase after them. So Pharaoh had regret. So there's an interesting commentary why Pharaoh had regret and why he decided to chase them was because when the Jewish people went out, so Pharaoh made peace with that. But also others went out, non-Jews. And as almost like collateral damage to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said, hold on, there's one thing letting the Jews out. There's the other thing is letting out all these able-bodied slaves that are not Jewish, right? They have no stake in this game. And so he decided that he's just gonna, this is too much to bear, and he's gonna bring them back. The Torah tells us that the Jewish people left armed. That they took weaponry with them, and the term that it uses is vachamushim. They left armed. Rashi says vachamushim. It teaches us a lesson that they only chamushim, only 1/5 left Egypt. So 80% of the Jews, the vast majority of the Jews did not leave Egypt. They stayed in Egypt and they died in Egypt. They died in Egypt. And what was which Jews left and which Jews stayed? So the Jews that poo-pooed Moshe and said, this ain't ever gonna happen. He's gonna have plagues from today until tomorrow, but he's never gonna set us free. Nobody has left Egypt before. This is not gonna happen. So they had very little faith. They died during the plague of darkness, and they were buried in the plague of darkness, and the Egyptians were no wiser. However, those that did believe, they left. So it's interesting. The people that came out of Egypt were actually the stronger ones. And it was the stronger ones that gave Moshe a very hard time. So even the stronger ones got their faith rocked in different occasions. But chamushim, only 80%. So we're talking approximately 2 million people went out. So that means there were something like 10 million people in total. So 8 million didn't get out. I mean, if you think of it in those numbers, it's vast numbers did not leave Egypt. And Moshe himself took the bones of Joseph, and there's a fascinating midrash how he did that. So the midrash says that because the Torah tells us that they buried Joseph in the Nile. The river Nile is what they worship. They felt Joseph was a holy Jew. So they placed him in a lead coffin, and it dropped to the bottom of the Nile. How do you get that up, right? They still haven't raised Pearl Harbor, right? They still haven't raised the Titanic. So how do you get that up? How do you bring up the Nile, the coffin from the Nile? So Moses, the Midrash tells us that Moses, Jacob gave a name to each one of his kids, right? One of them was a snake. One of them was a ship. One of them was an ox, etc. Yosef was the ox. Benjamin was the wolf. So Yosef, his symbol on his flag was an ox. So Moshe wrote on a piece of parchment with his holy hand. He wrote, Ale Shor, come up, ox. And he placed that on a piece of, he put that in the Nile, and all of a sudden Joseph's coffin rose to the surface, grabbed it, and they took it out of Egypt. It's interesting, that piece of parchment was grabbed by a Jew who used it later for terrible purposes in making the golden calf. So when the Jews threw the gold into the fire after receiving of the Torah, Micha took that piece of parchment and he threw it into the fire, and then out came a golden calf by using the parchment that Moshe wrote on. Moshe himself carried the bones because Moshe said he wanted this mitzvah and he wanted to teach the Jewish people a lesson. The lesson is as follows, that everybody's obligated to bury a loved one, but a Kohen is only allowed to bury a loved one, right? So a Kohen is allowed to bury a father, a mother, a brother, a sister, a son, daughter, or spouse. Other than that, a Kohen is not allowed to go to the cemetery. A Kohen is not allowed to go near a dead body, other than the 7 aforementioned. However, a Kohen is allowed to participate in a Mess Mitzvah.
How about
A Mess Mitzvah.
Can a Kohen bury his competition?
A Mess Mitzvah is when there's nobody involved with the burial. There's no family involved. And for example, a Kohen, even the high priest, right? Even the high priest walks along the street and sees a body. So he's allowed to pull the body and start digging and pull the body into the grave. That's considered the greatest mitzvah. Moshe at that time was a Kohen, because until the temple was made, Moshe was everything. Once a temple was made, Aaron took the Kahuna, Moshe took the Levite. But at that time, Moshe was a Kohen. So Moshe was teaching people that for a Mess Mitzvah, to carry the bones, he said, is the greatest honor, because there's no direct family. There's no Yosef's father, mother, brother, sister that weren't alive. So Moshe, excuse me, took on the sacred task. So he himself carried the bones, and as Joseph promised. The Torah continues, and by the way, there's another thing is Pharaoh. The Torah, when the Torah continues, there's an interesting thing. God told the people just travel, and God said to Moshe that Pharaoh is going to tell the Jewish people that they are lost and forlorn in the desert. Right? So who is Pharaoh going to tell? There was no Jewish people, right? So some people read it, the article says Pharaoh will tell about the Jewish people, but in the Hebrew, this is verse 3, chapter 14, it says, V'omar Pharaoh will say, Livnei Yisrael, to the Jewish people. So which Jewish people were in Egypt, right? They had either died or they left. So the Midrash says that there were 2 people that remained. That remained, and God kept them alive because they had to ultimately serve a purpose. These 2 people were the agitators of Moshe, Dathan and Abiram, Dathan and Abiram. Dathan and Abiram have a long history with Moshe. They were Moshe's basically arch nemesis to Moshe, and they were always, they They tattletale to Pharaoh that Moshe killed an Egyptian. They refused to come out because they didn't want to leave Egypt, but because they were more aligned. They were an Egyptian. Steve Levy wrote something earlier here on the post. He says the 80-20 rule seems to apply today. So that 80% didn't leave Egypt, but 20 did. So there's actually something to be said about the 80-20 rule. So if you look at the Jewish people as a whole, probably 20% are in tune, 80% are not in tune, even today. Right. So I'm preaching to the 20%, but the 80% are just not in tune. They're just not, they're slightly plugged in. Right. Also, in fundraising, so there's the 80-20 rule. There is that 20% of the people donate 80% of the money. It's there. It's alive and well. So this 80-20 rule is actually, Steve is right. It applies with so many things. Apathy. 80% of the people are apathetic to a certain cause. 20% of the people are not. Right? It could be Judaism. It could be Darfur. It could be the Holocaust. It could be, you have it. It's for some reason, it's not 70-30. It's 80-20. Not sure as to why. So Dasan and Aviram, Pharaoh told them, they're not coming back, are they? They said they're going to go away for a few days, but it's 3 days later, they're not coming back. So Pharaoh, he said, okay, they didn't keep their part of the deal. They told Pharaoh a fib, which is also an interesting thing, because Moshe kept on telling Pharaoh, we just want to leave to serve our God in the desert for 3 days. They had no intentions of coming back. But so why don't tell Pharaoh the truth? Right? Tell him the truth. We're not coming back. So a couple of things. First of all, that would have never happened. Like Pharaoh would not have. So you have to break him in. Okay, we're coming back. Now we're not coming back. Secondly, it was to in order for the next thing to happen, the Pharaoh should chase them. Pharaoh should be so outraged you didn't keep your deal. So he would chase them, which would ultimately lead to the demise of Egypt. So Pharaoh, by Yashir, he himself donned his chariot. He himself, right? So we know when God told Abraham to sacrifice his son, so we know that Pharaoh saddled his own donkey. And here Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, was so eager to participate in the chase and to terrorize these slaves that he's terrorized, right? That he himself went out to the front, which just shows us. Anyway, they took every able-bodied Egyptian male, took with him, and the Chorechev Mitzrayim, every chariot possible, and it tells us Beshalishim Akulai. So the commentaries say that normally when they drove a chariot, it had 2 horses. Pharaoh was so eager to show strength and speed that he added a 3rd horse. The commentary that says we can learn from Pharaoh. The Pharaoh did this for negative purposes. He added a 3rd horse in order to catch up to the Jewish people to do harm. So this commentary says that we should add a 3rd to our mitzvahs. So for example, if a pair of tefillin cost us $1,000, we're willing to spend $1,000, we should push ourselves to spend $1,300. Or it doesn't have to only be monetary, just like, if we're going to study, an hour Torah, study an hour and a 3rd Torah, right, this week. That we should always increase a 3rd to what our original intent was. And we learned this from Pharaoh. So the Torah tells us that Pharaoh ran, he reached them. Now the Jews had the sea in front of them, the sea of reeds in front of them. I think the reason why people call it the Red Sea is because if you go down to Eilat, right, which is so that that's it. Everything, the mountain region is very red, and then the water is very blue. So the contrast is, but it's really the sea of reeds. Suf, Suf. Suf is reeds, not red. I remember once being in a hotel in Israel, and there were a bunch of Christians who were there. And I said, "You enjoyed yourself today?" They said, "Well, we've been there 5 days, and we've seen the red, the dead, and the med." So that was their comment. So they call it the red. Anyway, so the Jewish people had this water in front of them, and they had the Egyptians.
Also, it says, Rebbe, they went to Baal Tzipon. There was a temple there or something.
There was an idol, yeah.
For their,
So they started to scream to Moshe, and there was different people screaming different things. Is there not enough graves in Egypt? Why did you do this, Moshe? It was an error in judgment. Why did you do this? Right? So some people said, let's turn to Egypt. Some people said, and be slaves. Some people say, let's just die in the desert. Let's just, do like they did in Masada. Some people said, fight. Right? And some people said, pray. Hashem said to them, Tachrishon, shut up. Shut up. There is another alternative here. And Hashem said, why is everybody talking? Just travel. Travel into the water. Lift your stick, Moshe, and travel. So it wasn't a time for prayer, it was a time for action. And as everybody knows, the famous medrash that nobody said, what, travel? Travel into water? You mean it was swimming with our kids and our, Anyway, so it was Moshe's brother-in-law, Nachshon. He married Miriam. And he said, if God said to travel, we travel. And with that, he walked into the sea. When the water came up to his mouth, all of a sudden it split. And so Nachshon was the first one to walk into the water. Nachshon was the one that was awarded that he was the first person to offer a sacrifice when they finally dedicated the Mishkan. So and he walked into the water and it split. Now, it says in the Gemara, it says in the Talmud that getting shidduch, for God to put two people together, husband and wife, future husband and wife, is kasha, is difficult like the splitting of the sea. It says in another place, I'm not sure where, it says earning a livelihood is difficult as the splitting of the sea. So what does that mean? So I saw a commentary. It's by the Meir Sheikh. He says something very interesting. And I think that was him where I saw it. He says as follows. He says that everybody had their opinion what we should do. Fight, kill ourselves, return to Egypt, pray, etc. Nobody thought of travel. Nobody thought of that option. It just wasn't thought of, right? It was and Hashem said, okay, travel. He says the same thing is with the shidduch. The same thing is with finding one's match. Is that you look here, you go to J-Date, and you go to J-Swipe, and then unfortunately you go to Tinder and Bumblebee and Hinge and all these places where Jews go, right? And he says, but however, God, you'll find, if you're open, you'll find from a source that you never thought possible, right? You never ever thought possible. So in other words, you can get invited to a Shabbaton, and you go to the Shabbaton, and you're not really into it, and all of a sudden you meet your woman of your dreams or your man of your dreams, right? It was an unexpected source. That's what the Kriyas Yamsuf, or the splitting of the sea, was unexpected. Nobody thought of that. So likewise, money. Right, a young couple, they start out and they said, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to start this business and it fails, and I start this business and it fails, and they said, oh my goodness, we're going to have a family, and all of a sudden they start something they never thought they'd be into, right, and it succeeded because we as Jews, have to have a plan. We have to have a plan A. We have to have a plan B. But ultimately, we have to know that there's Hashem. And our plan A and our plan B may be discarded, and Hashem has a plan for us, his plan A. Right? So that's why they say it's difficult, like Chris Yamsa, because it's difficult for us to comprehend comprehend of where the salvation is going to come. Whoever thought a year ago that we would be a year stuck in this COVID? Right? Whoever thought that? Right? Whoever believed that we would be so just attacked by an unknown, unseen, unless it's a microscope, unseen virus that changes our lives. No, who could have predicted? Who could have predicted? So the bottom line is that we can plan as much as we want. There's a saying, an expression in Yiddish: Gott tracht, a Mensch tracht und Gott lacht, which means that a person plans and God laughs. He says, yeah, right, that's going to happen, right? So, like, for all I know, God I may move to New Jersey, which is, if God is, in my plan, I'll never move to New Jersey in my entire life. I don't even like having the tires of my car on it, but who knows? Who knows? I went to Jersey twice last week, right? So Moshe lifted up his stick, and it split. And it says, and the people went on dry land. So they say in the Haggadah we read that there are 250 miracles happen at the sea. So I don't know 250, but I can tell you a few of them. First of all, if it was dry land, it means that they would have to go down pretty steep to get to dry land. And then when they came up, they would have to ascend pretty steep. So the one of the miracles was the water, they didn't have to, it just split, but they didn't have to go deep down because the water became like dry land. And so that was one of the miracles. Another one of the miracles is that the water was actually drinkable, potable water. So as they were walking through this thing, they could drink from it. According to the Medrash, it was actually tunnels. It wasn't, they had water above them. It was like the Atlantis, where you go in that slide. I've never been there, the slide, and then you go into a tunnel where you're surrounded by fish and sharks from all sides. So that was that type of thing. There were tunnels, and there were a number of tunnels. Then when the Egyptians followed, for them there wasn't dry land, it was mud. It was also hot mud. So it actually burnt off the chariot wheels and caused the chariots to be dragged along, as opposed to and of course the sea came crashing back. So the Jewish people had it very easy. And the Medrash says there was also like trees and fruit they could pluck as they walked through. So I don't. So in some places it says the Egyptians drowned like lead. In other places it says that they were thrown around like straw. And so they explain as follows: there's some right, 12 tunnels each tribe, right? I read that too. So some Egyptians drowned immediately. The kinder ones had a quicker death. Other Egyptians were like straw, is that they went under and then they came up, and they went under and they came up, and they had a tougher demise, right? Anyway, so the sea, so the what happened essentially is that God caused the wind to blow and stop the flow of water. So instead of water continuously flowing, he stopped the natural water from flowing, right? So B'teva, in nature, the water should flow. Here, God stopped it. and he stopped it with the wind. Now, God could have done like this and stopped it, but he stopped it with the wind, with a high wind. Stop it because he wanted the Egyptians to say, that's no miracle, right? That's a phenomenon, a natural phenomenon. Granted that it's not, you don't see it every day, but it is something that we can explain away. So let's as long as there's wind blowing, it was safe. But the truth be told, what happened? The truth told, what happened is that the Jews were like only 50 feet ahead of them, and so it was crashing behind them, the Egyptians, but dry in front. That's another one of the miracles. It wasn't that the Jews got out completely and then the Egyptians went in and were drowned, but it happened at the same time, at exactly the same time. Egyptians drowned, Jews were saved. And so God told Moshe, lift your hand and let the rivers, let the sea flow, but the waters flow back to its original deal, its original condition. The water should flow, right? When God made the world, God gave it everything he gave a tendency to, right? So earth, you're going to be heavy, right? Air, you're going to be light, right? Oil, you're going to be light in the water, etc., right? And so water, you're going to flow. So God said, okay, that's the Torah tells us, only one person remained. Right? The only person that survived was Pharaoh. And God did it for a reason, is he wanted Pharaoh to bear witness. Right? He wanted him to bear witness of what happened. So Pharaoh was actually spit out, and he went back to Egypt to tell the women that all their men had died. Now, they tell that wasn't all that was spit out. It was also the sea spat out the Egyptians and the chariots, and basically they were adorned with gold, and the chariots had were gold leaf or gold, and there was much it was pageantry when they went. They went with, and the Jews became extremely rich from this, because basically it was the national treasure that was on these chariots, etc. There was Pharaoh and the royal chariots, and the Jews became extremely wealthy, and that was the source of the wealth for a very long time, was basically the Egyptian the Egyptian treasury. And anyway, so as soon as that happened, it says, Oz Yashir Moshe. Then Moses and the children of Israel sang this song. Every commentary speaks about it. It says, Oz Yashir Moshe. Yashir was in the future. Then Moshe will sing. It's not Oz Shar Moshe. Moshe sang. Yashir, the yud in front, denotes future. That there will be a time when Moshe and the children of Israel sing another song upon the coming of Mashiach. But they sung this song, and there's many deep things in this shira. For example, one of them is Zeh Keli Maveo. This is my God, and I will exalt him. So Zeh, and as Rashi says, they pointed with their finger. They pointed with their finger. They said the godliness was so apparent, right? For the Jews, it was so apparent that they said, wow, look, what we just saw was God. What they saw was the same God punishing and saving at the same time, just like he did in Egypt with this killing of the firstborn. There was also many of these that left Egypt were survivors of the decree. Every boy throw into the Nile, and so they were going to be drowned, and they weren't drowned; they were saved. So they had a recognition that that God saved them twice from drowning. And there's we spoke about the the straws. Some people died like straw. Anyway, it says, God is a warrior. Hashem ish mechama, Hashem shemo. So generally, God is the way of Torah, etc. Is shalom, is peace, shalva, right? Just you don't go to war, but we learn from here that sometimes war is necessary. Sometimes war is something that we have to do. That we have to stand up and defend ourselves. That's true physically. That's also true spiritually, right? So when there's a spiritual decree, we have to stand up. Now, it gets a little tricky to know sometimes when to pick your battle. So, for example, COVID came, and the country shut down, which included synagogues and schools, et cetera, et cetera. So some rabbis, like Reb Chaim Kanievsky, at first said, no, we're not closing any shuls, any schools. We're not closing them down. This is a spiritual war, and we have to fight against it. And there's a New York Times article yesterday about him, about this concept. So it's just an interesting thing, because was he right or was he wrong? Right. His goal was to keep these yeshivas open so that they should be studied. They should which and do prayer and to stop the decree and prayer and a minyan. But because of that, people died. So it's hard to know. He eventually, by the way, acquiesced and said, okay, everybody, it's too dangerous, stay home. But it's so you got to fight. You fight, but you also have to. It has to be tempered with compassion, and it has to be tempered with common sense. So I don't know right, wrong. I don't know. I think you have to have Solomonic wisdom to know. I know to me, when it first came after Purim, and they said, shut it down. I didn't want to be the cause of, God forbid, anything, so we shut it down, and that's it. Chai Center was closed. It was a little crazy. I felt it was radical, but I was petrified that somebody would die because of my decision. Who knows? So it says that Miriam, Moshe's sister, she took Hatof, the symbol, in her hand, and all the women came out and danced and sang to God. So what does it mean, the symbol? So it says that Miriam, when Pharaoh made a decree earlier, way earlier, 80 years earlier, that all the boys should be thrown into the Nile. So Miriam's father, Miriam was alive. Aaron and Moshe, I think Aaron was also alive, I believe. Maybe not. I think he was. And Levi, Miriam's father, divorced Miriam's mother. Aaron was alive. Miriam said to her father, Pharaoh decreed on the boys, by you divorcing your wife, you made a decree on the boys and girls, right? So he remarried her. He remarried his wife, and Miriam was there as a young, teenager, whatever. She had the symbol. When they left Egypt, she grabbed that. She said, because something's got to happen here, and so she grabbed this symbol. And the Rebbe says that what a statement of faith that is. That you grab the symbol, you grab a musical instrument in the heat of the Exodus, is because something great is going to happen. And anyway, they traveled. They could not find water. And the people were saying to Moshe, why should we not have water? We're going to die, etc. And Hashem says, okay, I hear it. It's a valid decree. And they threw a tree into the brook, and the water became fit to drink. Then they came to another place, and they said, oh, there's no food. So they had enough food for a month. When they left Egypt, they brought enough of this unbaked dough, unleavened dough. They had enough to eat, but only for 1 month. So it was on the 15th day of the second month of going out of Egypt, they ran out of food. And they said, oh my goodness, we're going to die, we remember the meat that we ate in Egypt, which is such a terrible thing to say. Now, for them to ask God for food and water was fine. But to start saying, remember the meat was bad. But Hashem said, okay, I got to give him food. It's true. So God said, every single day, I'm going to give you something called manna. And every single day, you're going to collect it. And on the sixth day, you're going to collect double measure. And that you should know that I'm Hashem. So, Moshe told the Jewish people, and sure enough, they woke up the next morning and there was this manna.
Was it like shawarma?
The manna was like a white coriander seed. And they basically, you milled it and it became flour, and then you can make different things with it.
Oh yeah, some people said that it was whatever you wanted to taste.
And whatever to taste like, apparently, it had a magical quality. Now, it produced no waste, the manna. The manna came from heaven every day, and there was nothing, it was
You had to eat it the same day.
It was gluten-free, etc.
All the gastro guys are out of business.
Right. So this manna came from heaven, and the Torah tells us that each person it was an omer. Oh, no, thank you. It was there was one leader for each person. For example, I'm omer. I'm not exactly sure what an omer is, right? It was equivalent of I don't know 42 eggs or something like that. But I don't even remember. So it was an omer. So and the Torah says no matter what they brought home, there was exactly an omer. Exactly. So even if they brought a little more when they came home, they weighed it, measured it, it was an omer. If they brought less, it was an omer. And every single day, and Hashem said to Moshe, tell the Jewish people not to leave it over. And if you leave it over, it's going to become wormy because it's not to be left over. And they tested, and sure enough, it became wormy. And then it came to the sixth day. The sixth day they came in, they had 2 omers per person. And Moshe told them, this is what God is saying, that tomorrow there's going to be no manna. It's Shabbat. And that tomorrow you will not find. The people went out anyway to look, and there was no manna. And Hashem got angry and says, come on. Now, the manna is a very, very powerful lesson. And the manna, the sages attribute to livelihood. So, first of all, so the first of all, this is their livelihood, right? The manna is this is their bread. This is their bread and butter, right? This is what they ate. So Hashem will give each and every person their parnasa, their livelihood, and the end of the day or the end of the year, it's exactly what God said you should get, no more, no less. Right? So if it's decreed that you should make 200,000 this year, you'll make 200,000 this year. If it's decreed you should make 220,000 or 203,000 or 320,000, it's decreed. The code of Jewish law says that what's not included in the equation is what you give to tzedakah. So it's 220,000, excluding what you give to charity. Right? I don't know about taxes. I have no idea. And whatever you spend on Shabbat and Yom Tov. So you buy chicken, you buy meat, which you normally don't have during the week. That is not part of the equation. And we see this from the manna. They got no more and no less. It's whatever God promised.
Was it sugar free?
It's also we learn from here is that you have to go. It's a daily grind, right? The next day they had to go out again, and the next day, what do? They actually ground the manna, daily grind, right? So you have to work every day. You can't just say, God, I worked Monday, tomorrow I'm not working, bless me. Right? I'm going to spend at the beach. I'm going to go to Sunken Meadow for the next 3 days. Bless me with parnasa. It doesn't work that way. You've got to go to the daily grind. You have to make your hishtadlus. You have to make your participation. You have to do your part. The next thing we learn from the manna is that trust God a little, and Shabbat, let Shabbat be, let go and let God. Shabbat, there was no manna, right? But there was enough on Friday for Saturday, and that's why we have two breads. That's why when we have two challahs Friday night, Shabbat day, we have two breads. Why? To commemorate the manna. And that's exactly why we have two. So, right, there's and I've told you this before, there's a letter from the Rebbe to somebody who didn't want to close his business on Shabbat. He says, my business is so busy on Shabbat. If I close it, I lose a good chunk of my business. I don't just lose 1/7. So the Rebbe wrote to him, and the Rebbe said to him, trust God a little bit. He says, you may make money on Shabbat. It's true, you may make money, but you may have car problems. You may have doctor's bills. So the same God, right, that you make a little less money, but you'll have less aggravation, and that money will be spent on good things instead of bad things. That's a letter from the Rebbe. Now, would I write this? I wouldn't write it. I'm not a Rebbe to write that to somebody. But we can talk about it because there is that letter. It was to an antique dealer, actually, in Manhattan, one of the avenues. And so that, so you can all of a sudden make your 2,000, but it goes on a transmission, right? Or 2,000, and it goes on, your deductible because you had to get a CAT scan, a PET scan, and all of a sudden you find yourself spending a lot of money. So, so that's the idea of having faith, right? You put your ball in motion. On Friday you work, and on Shabbat you're blessed. God said to save the manna, to save it for posterity's sake, and they put it. The manna was actually put in the ark, together with the tablets, together with Pharaoh's stick, together with the Torah that Moshe wrote. So there was, in that ark, there was a bunch of things, and they had the manna for 40 years. As soon as they went into Israel, the manna stopped, because God said, now you got to work. You got to till the land. Until now, it's the desert. It's not fair. I can't let you live in the desert, barren desert. So then they started to complain, we have no water, because they traveled again. And the famous story, God told Moshe to hit the rock. And Moshe hit the rock and actually caused, as Rashi says, caused a crack in the rock. So his stick, which as Rashi says was made out of sapphire, slammed down on the rock and made a little indent in the rock. And from there came water. And
God told him to hit the rock?
The first time.
The first time
God told them to hit the rock. And so they hit the rock and they had water. The end of the parsha is that because they complained so much, God said, you know what, I need to test them a little bit. And Amalek came and attacked the Jewish people. Who did he attack? So he attacked, there were certain people who were spat out of the camp because they were sinners. Either they were lepers, or they weren't part of the Jewish people. They were, people, and they weren't part of the camp. Amalek attacked. And God said it's so egregious that Amalek attacked, so egregious, because they just came out of Egypt. Everybody was afraid of the Jewish people. And Amalek poured cold water on faith. Even for the Jews, he poured cold water. So Hashem said, we have to fight him back. So Amalek decided to attack on the longest day of the year by the Vernox. So, and they said, because it's the Vernox, the solstice, right? That's the day they attacked. So, not the longest day of the year, not the longest day, but on the solstice. And so Hashem said, I'm going to show them. And this is one day a miracle occurred, and the sun held. The sun didn't set until Amalek was destroyed, because Amalek had this whole plan, and Hashem was the sun stopped on that day. That was Moshe did it that day in honor of Moshe, and then it happened again, the Giva, another time with Joshua where the sun didn't set. Right, Shemesh Begivon. Yeah, right. So the sun. Anyway, God said we need to avenge Amalek. We need to make sure it never happens again. Now it's interesting to note Amalek has the same numerical value as Safek, as doubt. and
Suffolk County.
Suffolk, yeah, as doubt, Suffolk County. And so there's a whole talk of the Rebbe is that any decision is better than no decision at all. Doubt is toxic. Doubt is acid. Doubt eats away at yours. So a person, you should try and take doubt out of the equation. If a person has doubt, they vacillate. If a person doesn't have doubt, then they're not going to vacillate. They're going to stick to their, stick to their opinions. Doubt is one of the worst things you can have, because you can always say, well, I doubt, I'm not sure, I'm agnostic, I'm not exactly sure. It's kind of better to be an atheist and be steady in your position. You have more respect for somebody than to be an agnostic who's not sure, unsure. So the Rebbe said, doubt creates problems. Don't have doubt. This concludes today's class. God bless, be well, and we'll reconvene.
Right, right. Many of